Welcome to the Soul Fam podcast. On today's episode, I am introducing you to Manuel Casanueva. He is a return guest. Manuel brings something very special to this podcast that introduces what he identifies himself as a
ritual philosopher and theurgist.
A ritual philosopher. And he brings a special blend of understanding of the Hermetic sciences, language, and the power of language as it is spoken, as it is orated. And he has a very dynamic interest in the Emerald Tablet and a multiple level of understanding of other ancient texts, which are relevant to our very fast changing times.
Diana, what if I told you that language wasn't just to convey a message? What if I told you that language can also attune your awareness? I started studying Greek and Latin back in 1998, and it was in the conventional academic way. That means that it's translation, it's historical context, it's philosophy. So over time and working with different texts, I started noticing a pattern. And this pattern was about the fact that many traditions really didn't just treat language as a tool. So not just for explaining ideas, but the texts were actually doing something. And this is fascinating, right? Language was handled deliberately in a sense that it shaped attention and organized thought. Now, we have to think that all of this visualization of the text as in their performative aspect comes from the fact that in the ancient world, most texts were transmitted orally. Print was a game changer because it brought silent reading as the norm. But silent reading, if you think about it, just really hides the embodied side of language. And by that, I mean hearing and speaking. So in that sense, meaning came not only in the past, not only from looking at words in the page. We have to remove that modern reader bias. It came from actually performing it. In that sense, sound mattered. And sound mattered, and we have to think that that's why everything feels so strange when we approach an ancient text. It's not constructed the way we expect it. It's not a modern book. An ancient text is not there to solve your problems. It's quite the opposite. It expects you to come back to it. Now, if we were to pick one city and one period where we can study these types of texts that are performative, that is Alexandria, the city of Alexandria. And why? Because, Egypt and Egypt ritual and Greek philosophy and Jewish theology, of course, and Near Eastern cosmology, they all blended for centuries. And you have to think that all these different languages were combined and just syncretic. And they've shaped enough material to create texts that were speaking, that were meant to be performed. Now, in that sense, if we were to look for a clear example about this aspect, we have to go to Egypt, Roman Egypt. In Roman Egypt, the Greek magical papyri appeared. And the Greek magical papyri are a fascinating collection, because in that sense, it contains, of course, many instructions for the initiate, to entrain the initiate through breath and rhythm. Yeah, so when you read this and when you approach this text, these are formulas, mnemonic formulas that you were supposed to repeat them. Now, what do the Greek magical papyri sort of as a representation of this Alexandrian worldview teach us? Or what is the question? The quest of the ancient world to reconnect with the source. Remember, the word religion is religare in Latin, to go back to the source. And if we would analyze it from the philosophical perspective, we have the Neoplatonists. For example, Proclus. He said, how do you connect with the source? Through understanding and contemplation. So the traditional aspect was the mind. But later on, and also in that current Neoplatonism, we have Iamblichus, another author. And he reaches the limit of philosophy. So again, Proclus, so these are Neoplatonists. I know you may not be familiar, but they're very important when we're understanding the performative role of language. Proclus first, who believed through contemplation you reach the source, and Iamblichus second, who said there is a limit to philosophy. We cannot just access the source through contemplation alone. We have to access it through ritual. And this is the birth of something called theurgy. Theurgy. Maybe your audiences haven't heard from it before, but
I-
the translation of theurgy, the word, is a divine word, and divine work in the sense that you are trying to reconnect with the source through your words. So the goal is to align the human soul with the universe. And how do you do that? Obviously, through expressing your intent through language. So theurgy appears after philosophy, after contemplation. And think about Alexandria and all the Mediterranean in these centuries, how ritual and practice were embodied in all traditions. Now, for theurgy, and this is quite important, language becomes a tuning fork for the soul. Language becomes a tuning fork for the soul. Yeah? So, in that sense, it helps you connect with spirit, with the source, with the one, with the cause of everything. There is an interesting figure to understand this phenomenon in antiquity, and that is Hermes, the god Hermes. And Hermes, let's not think about the myth of Hermes. Let's give permission to think about the archetype. Okay? So Hermes is a figure that can travel different realms of reality. That's why he's a messenger, right? So when you're looking to connect to the one, what's the archetype that you're going to reach to? It's Hermes. He's a psychopomp. He connects different worlds. That's why he has, wings. Now, Hermes becomes Hermes Trismegistus in late antiquity. Hermes Trismegistus is the name. Is the thrice great Hermes. That's the meaning of that. And this is a symbolic author to which many magical Hermetic texts are attributed to. Hermes Trismegistus. Let's go back a little bit to what we're doing. What we're doing here is giving a context to how you approach magic from language itself. Now, if you approach them from ancient texts, you have to learn how to read them. And how to read them is different from the modern bias of silent reading. Ancient texts and ancient languages have instructions as to how everything has to be read, because it in its structure is the ability to memorize it. So you recite it. And because of that, we linked that idea of the performative aspect of language to the city of Alexandria. And we said that in Alexandria, all cultures were blending. And an example of this could be the Greek magical papyri. If you read them, they're instructions to be spoken aloud. So I know it's a lot, but this work is a lot. And
It's fascinating.
So divine work, yes, it is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is.
So the work is divine work, and that is theurgy. And theurgy has a lot to do with sound. So we talked about Hermes. In what capacity? In the capacity that he is the archetype that will help us transcend the different realms and make our soul and help us connect with the source. And then we said that Hermes has a different name in late antiquity, that is Hermes Trismegistus, to which many books are attributed to. Yeah?
I was curious if he is indeed the author of the Emerald Tablet, or if he's attributed as the author, and if that's accurate.
Absolutely. He's attributed authorship for the Emerald Tablet. Now, the Emerald Tablet is fascinating. The first written version of the Emerald Tablet appeared in Baghdad after the founding of something called the House of Wisdom. And this is around 830 CE. So after the founding in Baghdad of the House of Wisdom, that was sort of gathering all sorts of texts after the decline of pagan schools in the West. In Arabic, they started translating. And we have the apparition of a book that is The Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature by an author called Balinas. Yeah? And Balinas, appears in this book at the end, the tablet, in Arabic. And its structure has survived all sorts of translations and all sorts of interpretations. It traveled from Baghdad all the way to Sevilla. And it
Hmm.
entered the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and it became a Latin version. So there are different versions of the tablet, of course, both in Arabic and in Latin. What is remarkable is who has studied the tablet. For example, did you know that Isaac Newton was obsessed with the tablet?
No.
He annotated the tablet and because he saw it as principles. Let me be clear about what the Emerald Tablet is. The Emerald Tablet is a cipher composed of 12 aphorisms. Aphorisms are short sentences, yes? And they're built grammatically in a very simple way. So they're very short, compressed, and simple. Now, the brilliance is that in 12 aphorisms, or 12, let's call them sentences, the author created a full picture of the Hermetic worldview that, of course, doesn't belong to Alexandria. You know, it appeared in Baghdad, so let's be clear about that. But it reflects the worldview that was born in Alexandria. That worldview of the text that we were talking, like the Corpus Hermeticum or the Greek magical papyri. So there are more complex bodies of work when we talk about the sacred science of ritual, of theurgy, right? But it is the Emerald Tablet that became a portable device. So think about a portable device that can travel through cultures and centuries, unaltered, unfiltered, and most importantly, without distortion. Of course, there are many different ways to interpret it. You would be amazed at the different interpretations of the tablet. If you go to Baghdad, for example, in the 830, or to Sevilla or to Jung, you know, the interpretations of the tablet vary greatly, but the message is one. So it does not depend on belief. That's what's important to know. So the first sentence of the tablet in Latin is Tum et verissimum. And it means something like truth without distortion, you know, pure truth. And let's consider it an oath. So the first sentences in the Emerald Tablet, and I'm sure your audience will Google it, and the picture of the Emerald Tablet will appear, and you can read the first sentences at the beginning of it. And it's the sentences for truth. So what the Emerald Tablet does is expressing the principles of reality and its associations. So it talks about the universe and how it was created and how you can co-create with it in that sense. But it doesn't tell you any details.
What do you
Now,
mean? So, how do we co create without details?
yes, that's a perfect question. Let's think about the most famous sentence of the tablet, which is as above, so below. I'm sure you've heard it, and many people have heard it. As above, so below. We do not take that metaphorically. We take it as a principle of reality. And that means that both the macrocosm and the microcosm mirror each other. As above, so below. There is a mirror. Because the Hermetic philosophy really doesn't believe in this is more nuanced than this. I'm simplifying, but there's not the distinction between spirit and matter. So your soul is the microcosm of the universe, right? And the tablet becomes a mirror in between your soul and the mind, the nous, the universe, right? So here you are, here's the tablet, here's the universe. And your soul, whatever you do with your soul, you're doing in the universe. It's the same. To be quite honest, and I know that there's a lot of sensationalism around the tablet, but if you're serious about working it, you have to think that in Greek, there's a term called miesis. Miesis. This is initiation. It means a long process. If you want to work with the tablet, you will have to work on yourself. And I think that's the most surprising aspect of magic. The fact that because your soul mirrors the universe, you are responsible for its balance and harmony and structure. So I think many people get disappointed because they have a more fantastical view of magic. But really, it's day to day working on yourself. And if that expresses in therapy, physical activity, or healthy eating, that's magic too. And that's working with the tablet too. And I think that it's, for me, and I can only speak about myself. And what I do basically is I work line by line. I I'm a philologist, so I work with a big dictionary, right? And you look up the words and you try to build relationships between grammar, syntax, and all the structures of language. So you do the technical analysis. And from that, you start seeing that the universe has an order and a certain movement, a circulation, you know? What as above, so below. So think about that. It's very simple and very complex. You know, it hides, it's two as above, so below. It's 4 words, but it contains the entire secret of the universe with all its implications. That's why you have thousands of treatises and disputes about words, about meanings of words, right? Thousands of authors and centuries, just discussing one of the words. For
Right.
example, like the use of the word talisman in the tablet. You can look it up and you'll see that there are many authors discussing with each other. So regardless of that, what does it mean to you? It means that if you're looking for the tablet, if it appeared to you, it means that you're looking to reconnect with coherence and that you're willing to work on yourself so that all these distortions that we have, these emotions, these habits can be cleansed and purified so we can transform ourselves into a better version. That's the goal, and the refinement of the self is the goal. And whoever thinks that that doesn't come with effort, persistence, and just being constant and focused is mistaken. So that's what I wanted to convey. You don't need to look any further, to be quite honest. If you want to do Hermeticism, start looking at yourself. Remember, as above, so below. If you're coherent and if you work in harmony with your purpose, you become a co-creator. You asked me that, Diana. How do you become a co-creator? Well, yes, it's aligning yourself with your purpose. So you think I'm not a fun magi, I think, because I'm very grounded. I think it's about grounding yourself. I think it's about being safe, being healthy, and being mindful. And you do your breath work and your meditation, and you wake up early and you do sports, just like in any other discipline. It's no different.
Okay. How can our technology assist us in helping to create the mirror rather than being interference?
That is a wonderful question. I don't blame tools, if you know what I mean. I think a tool is just a tool. I think it's a double-edged sword. We are not AI. We're human. It's mind, body, and soul, not just mind. And I think that there is a trap, and I see this in my students, of perfection, of perfect language, of flawlessness, right? This gloss of flawlessness that I think is stopping us from understanding that the conjunction of body, mind, and soul is the key for any practice. So I think that you can use, I don't judge anybody for using anything. I think that if it's a great equalizer if you know how to use it. People have access to information and a tool for development if they will. And if they use it for good, great. And I think that can be an asset for someone, as well as it could be detrimental. As a teacher in university, what I see is that students get frozen because they're not perfect, So I would advise everybody to just not try to compete with that and bring it back to the body and to that kind of experiential practice. That's why my practice is about recitation, and recitation embodies language. And that's something that cannot be replaced. It's a human endeavor. So, yeah, basically, we have to think that the tablet is, in a sense, it articulates a view of how reality is structured. And when we use that view, and when we view ourselves as co-creators, we elevate ourselves and we find that coherence and that purpose. And the soul reflects the order of the cosmos. That's the message that I want the audience to take away, And when you're approaching an ancient text, remember that ancient text is not created for silent reading. It's about rhythm. It's about breath. It's about the body, and da, 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 da. That's the rhythm of the hexameter. And that's how you recite, for example, Homer and the hymns of Homer. And it's like a tide. It goes back and forth and back and forth. Hexameter means 6, so it's 6 times like that. And you can only understand that when you recite it. Nothing can replace that. No machine can replace the human experience. Also, I think the Emerald Tablet is a magical text. It is a magical text. It depends on what you understand for magic. But magia is, in late antiquity, is an operational knowledge of different levels of reality. So it coexisted along philosophy. And that's why the Emerald Tablet is magic. But what it is not a collection of incantations or spells. That's what's not the Emerald Tablet. It's just compressed, and it doesn't argue, persuade, or demonstrate anything. It just shows the worldview of Hermeticism. And I would say, the fact that the tablet is so complex and so simple, and the fact that it's a portable device, it's the genius of it. When I first encountered the tablet, I assumed that this had been discovered somewhere, like dug from a temple. But it wasn't. It appeared in this book, and it has always circulated. And and this is an invitation for our audience to explore, because there are thousands of resources available of high quality to research the Emerald Tablet.
Manuel, in all of the ancient texts that you've studied, the voice and the pronunciation perhaps of words, or just the spoken word itself, has value. How does that translate into modern times, into especially this time where we're sort of starting to stand up for ourselves, whether it's through presence or through voice? How do we make this all sort of pull together?
Well, a beautiful word in Greek that I can think of is pneuma. And pneuma is breath. And they believe that language carried breath. And breath is the animating force of spirit. So what is the difference between a thought and a word? That a thought is just here. A word is in the world. So a world manifests your intentions. The universe does not reward potential. It rewards movement. The seed wants to grow, but you have to put it on earth for it to have roots. And that is the word. So express yourself with coherence, in harmony, in balance. That is the ancient Greek way, and that is the ancient way, the way of living, of life, in harmony with nature, with others, with your behavior being part of the universe and not just working against it. This is in politics. If we talk about politics in Greece, and maybe this will be useful for the audiences, they believe that the city had to function in harmony with the universes, with the planets. It was all about being coherent. That's why they practice ritual, right? So the ancient practiced ritual to appease the gods, to keep balance between the realms. Your behavior counts. It matters. It's the soul, the mirror of the universe. So this is what you work on. So make your words very clean and make them count.
Beautiful.
And words are acts. Yeah, words are acts. Your word in the world is an act. Just this idea that I've had about printing, right? That how it changed us as readers, and how we're so used that the norm is silent reading. And we stop sharing. When I would invite anyone to share the act of reading with someone else. And it seems revolutionary, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a very special thing. I don't know if you've been to a book club, for example, but something very special happens. You know how it entrains focus, the capacity to bring together a group when you're reading something, for example. The mind, the attention, the focus on one thing, it's really special.
There's a certain power in all of that.
Yes, there is power in language. Language is not just a tool for communication. And words are not just meaning. We have to keep that in mind.
Right.
Otherwise, it would be too simple. It would be too simple.
In an age of texting and voice, in an age of texting, using text or using technology to communicate without the spoken word, I find this really interesting and powerful.
Yes. Fortunately, it depends on what you do. But if, as a teacher, I'm used to public speaking. And this sharing process and the energy of the room, how you can shift the energy of the room just with your words. So I would invite anyone to reach out and to have conversations. It's healthy.
Yeah.
And seek for connection rather than transaction. There is a tribe in the Kalahari in Southern Africa, and talking about connection of people. Their concept of friendship, I think it's xalo, I think that's the word, is about giving something without return necessarily. So it's a huge desert and they are nomads. So the chances of meeting each other are very scarce. So the friendship is friendship because it is sustained over time without that person giving you anything. You can give something to someone and not receive anything for 5 years, and it has nothing to do with that person being your friend. You can meet that person 5 years later and be friends. That's xalo. And if you expect something from someone, that is transaction and not friendship. So think about that in terms of how we think about connection and how we try to avoid connection because we're so disappointed most of the time. I think people try to avoid real connection and conversations because they're afraid to getting disappointed. But why would you have to expect anything to share? And you will receive if it's not immediate.
So, as a conscious collective, how do our voices and the spoken word help us connect with the divine, with our higher selves, and with one another as a collective?
As a collective with a higher self. I think I am a firm believer in action grounded on the daily basis. I don't think in great promises. I think in small acts. I think a small act of kindness. What we need to do is restore the collective first. We need to restore trust, the ability to trust each other. To not think of others as a threat first. And there's a lot of reparation. And that's the beauty of the word. The word is a bridge between humans. If we communicate with each other, we can restore the collective and we can act as one. But that requires work and communication, transmission, if you will.
Right. Transmission. Correct. Beautiful. Manu, I'm going to let you continue to wrap this up in a way that you feel shares that message that really was part of the ancient text and what can kind of tie all of this together, because sometimes we're lost in this world about communication, about understanding ourselves, about connecting with the divine. And how do you feel that your work and such works as the Emerald Tablet help us manifest, create magic, create the divine connection?
By giving you a framework, you need a container. You need to contain your energy for it to manifest. So again, it's about covering yourself with layers, if you will, gently and slowly. And again, that can only happen with time. We are obsessed with immediacy. Everything has to be now. And that is the real enemy of, working on yourself. You have to enable yourself to change over time, and that there is no substitute for that. And I would like to be very clear about that. In terms of my spiritual practice, it's about consistency. And in terms of language, I think in my work, what I do is approach the text from the embodied side so that we as a group experience it together. It's funny how it works, but the text does the magic on its own. It circulates through you when you're reciting. When you're reciting, you're looking at, for example, Latin is very compact and it's very, the grammar is very strict and everything, but surprisingly, the sound is very soft and buttery. So it's a funny thing how Latin is in structure is very tight and mathematical, but in sound, it just flows. So it's very different from reading silently than to experience the text. When you experience the text, you give yourself time with it. I guess that in our times, we have very little mercy with ourselves, especially now. And it is one time after the other, after the other, after the other. Think of any craft. Think of any craft and how art is built through time. So the message is nothing sorts overnight. There is no recipe. There is no magical recipe an incantation that will just, change everything. It's a slow, gradual process, and you will find your voice eventually, It just don't stop.
That's very, very, very powerful, Manu, and very, It's a very amazing thing to say right now. And I feel like wrapping up this year actually with so much change in the planet that it's very encouraging.
You know, for Gnostics, properly spoken sound reshapes the soul. Properly spoken sound reshapes the soul. So for our audiences, you know, in Greece, there are nymph bees. They're bees, the melissae, and the bees would hum, you know, the sound that the bees make. And this humming is related to the oracles. Think of the language of the oracles as sacred utterances and not a logical language, rather something that appeared and that would only make sense with time. So then again, language and time. Language is an immediate thing, but its effects can be long time. So patience. It's all about patience.
Beautiful. Am I missing anything, Manu? I know this has been a little difficult with our internet connection, but am I missing something that you wanted to be sure to convey to the audience right now?
Okay, let me see. No, I think we covered everything.
Wow. I mean, listening to you makes me want to take Latin from you and to just really ingest it into my system. And it feels much less intimidating now, having spoken with you about it.
Absolutely, that's what I want. I don't want people to feel intimidated by language. It's as simple as sitting down with an alphabet. You can learn an alphabet and you can use a dictionary and you're set. It's will. It's will.
Is it also that by doing so, it opens a whole door, it opens a whole avenue to the magic and the power of those written words from so many years ago, so many centuries ago, that carry forward into this time or into this timeline?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All these traditions, you know, studying these ancient traditions and bringing them back, you know, it's so important to preserve ancient Greek and Latin in this context, you know, because it does, I think it's a beautiful work full of discipline. And when you see the texts being performed, you learn how traditions worked in a sense, and it just gets a different dimension. I would say it's like going to the opera, if you will, versus listening on your headphones. So the whole thing blows up, you know, and it's different, and you value it differently. So let's value tradition. It's ancient technology that is available for us. It's there. We just have to reach out, you know? Think of how many generations have gone by.
And how applicable it is to today. And it is to our community, especially that is about higher consciousness and evolution and spirituality, how they can really, this is a real resource and something that can be part of their daily practice.
And I think it's also healthy to understand our modern biases in spirituality. And that can only be done by studying the past and different traditions. And I think it's a healthy exercise, you know? So again, try to read out loud the next time and see what happens.
We will do that. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Should we wrap this up as it is right now?
Yes. Do you think you can work with this material?
Yeah, I think I can. I think it's actually super powerful and it's so important right now. And funny, it's that I'm really focusing a lot on sound and frequency and understanding the power of ourselves, because so many of us have given our power away and we're returning to ourselves. So this is a divine and beautiful way to embody all of that.
That's amazing. I love it.